Today on the show is Ben Silton, CEO and co-founder of TrelliSense. TrelliSense is a company that is developing a laser-based methane emissions tracking technology that they're applying to oil and gas, agriculture, and landfills. Before TrelliSense, Ben spent time hopping between startup industry, consulting industry, advisory roles, like we speak about a little bit. One of my favorite stories of his is being at Divert, a renewable energy and food waste company, where he scaled the analytics and operations team from 7 to about 100 in his 5-year span. In the conversation, we get into not only his personal journey, but also tactics and playbooks about how to go from absolute 0 to 0.5 to 1 to 1.5, selling into tough industries, complex industries such as oil and gas, such as utilities, and how getting forklift certified informs how he runs TrelliSense today. Thank you, as always, to our partners, Clean Tech Growth Lab. If you're looking to grow as a clean tech company, you want to work with them. And if you're looking to grow in any other industry, it's Craze and Friends, the producer of this podcast. And now for Ben. Ben, are you still with me?
I am. You froze there for a second. I think the advertising gods didn't want me to hear that one, but I think I'm back with you.
Yeah. Well, this is awesome. I was just telling Ben how excited I am for this episode. I'll spare the details of how we met, of how it went over his experience. It really resonated with a lot of my interests as far as bringing ideas that are valuable in climate tech and clean tech into the world. But before we get into the rest of it, Ben, if you could give a brief introduction of yourself and what you're building.
Sure. Yeah. And yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on, Blake. It's great to meet you a couple months ago. I'm glad we're finally able to line this up and excited to chat and see where this conversation goes. So, as a brief intro to myself, a numbers nerd by background. My career has kind of been consulting and then startup, and then consulting and then startup. Obviously very different roles, working in consulting versus working in a startup. And in both startups I've been in have been, essentially ground floor, single digit number of FTEs upon joining. And all of it's, does roll up into climate somehow. So, the consulting was, energy, utilities, or kind of environmental economics. And then both the startups I've worked in now have actually kind of been reducing waste. Formerly at a startup reducing food waste, and now at a startup reducing essentially gaseous waste or methane waste. Just kind of fell in love with waste reduction as both an economic problem and an environmental problem. And it just kind of makes a lot of sense to me to keep pushing on it, because there's also no shortage of waste to go around. So there's kind of always more work to do there. So yeah, happy to dive in deeper anywhere.
So before we get into TrelliSense and your current solution and the methane waste that you're speaking to, I'm curious, you personally, did you wake up when you were 3 years old and say, I can't wait to start a company, be an entrepreneur? Like, at what point was this lifestyle something that you knew you wanted to do?
I still had dreams of playing in the NBA, a lot older than I'd care to admit. Dreams should have died a lot earlier than it did. But even when I was in college and facing graduation, I still wondered about what I would do. And I remember interviewing for finance jobs, like one interview in particular, talking to a woman, reading my resume, asking me questions. And at one point in the interview, she just put my resume down on the table and said, if money was no object, what would you do? Like, would you be here? And I was like, I don't think so. And the interview was over and I stopped applying for finance jobs. And it was just like that moment that I did. And that sort of prompted me to just think a little bit more about, I'm jumping into a career. I'm about to spend the next 30, 40 years on something. I might as well care about it. What are the things that I care about the most? And I remember like locking myself in my house and like laying on the floor for what was probably more than an hour and just saying, just thinking about, what can I see myself doing? What do I care about? Um, what makes the most sense to me in terms of things that have to be done in the world? Because there are ways to make money doing anything. You just have to go find them. It was really just there in that moment I decided what I cared about. And I had seen enough case studies, success stories, role models who had done well working in reducing, the environmental burden that our daily practice and economics place on the world. And just kind of decided that's what I wanted to do. And I think it's too hard to be prescriptive about where within, what we might call the broad umbrella of sustainability I should work and want to work. There's a lot of different ways to attack that problem, and there's a lot of other problems in the world too. But I knew what I wanted to do had to be in some way, directly or indirectly, in support of a more sustainable world. And I have also been lucky to find that. I think it was, like anyone, a combination of active pursuit plus, dumb luck,
Yeah.
getting jobs and meeting the right people and finding opportunities along the way. So I have been both thoughtful and lucky about staying in the space.
Well, that went right into my next question. I was curious if, in a similar way, if this idea of sustainability, the environment, this sector, this space has always been something that you were interested and passionate about. And for a brief moment, thank you to that interviewer who asked you that question, who indirectly created this moment. But yeah, has it always been sustainability, the environment, or did that happen at some point too?
Oh yeah, always. I mean, it's I would say the more I got into it, the more passionate I became. I think that the more I
Cool.
believed and also understood just the myriad ways that anybody's career could improve sustainability in their own, whether it's their own life, their own community's life, the way of the world. It's you could make a company that's totally unrelated more sustainable. You can go into a sustainability focused company and just make it 1% better. There's a lot of sort of ways to attack the problem. And coming into the working world as a bright-eyed 22-year-old who didn't know anything, it sort of the portrait of the world started filling in front of me as I did more work, listened to more podcasts, read more books, and just kind of learned both the scale but also the diversity of the problem.
Sure.
I think I fell more in love with it as I learned more about both the nature and the urgency and the diversity of the problem.
Yeah. So have you, so I know titles, by title, I guess, this would be an easy question to answer, but have there been other roles that you've held in the past that are similar to what you're doing now with TrelliSense, or is this completely different?
There's definitely similarities to all my past roles. I draw on, like in today's role, I draw on both knowledge and networks and expertise, from previous roles. It's actually sort of an interesting combination of all of them. What I am doing now, I've definitely, at any given day, I'll draw from skills and expertise from certain pockets of my career. But honestly, even go back to research I did in undergrad on the economic damages due to air pollutant emissions. and now I'm leading a methane emissions monitoring company. It's kind of a funny, sort of through line through all of it, learning about how the EPA works when I was first in consulting and working in food waste. And we do a lot of work now in landfills at TrelliSense. So I feel right at home walking into a landfill, throwing my boots on. And my previous consulting role before this actually is kind of what led me to TrelliSense.
Sure.
And so it's there really kind of is a
Yeah.
winding string through all of it.
Yeah. So is there, I guess, in all the things you've done, let's say, are there two, and you can choose any of them, are there two specific experiences that have significantly impacted how you decide to navigate leading TrelliSense?
Two experiences. Um, Excellent question. Gee, one would be a lot easier, but let me see if I can do this.
Okay,
So
well, let's start
I
with
think
one.
the first, all right, it's always one at a time. Yeah,
Yeah.
startup lesson number one right there. So I think the first story, probably like what comes to mind is working at the food waste startup, um, probably about 10 years ago now, maybe even to the month. Um, I was at a startup called Divert, and we were working with a large grocery chain in the Pacific Northwest, essentially running a pilot, simulating what would it be like, to work with us. And so we were taking these bins full of food waste and, disposing of them and bringing the bins back to the stores to fill them up. And, this was like raw, like we did it ourselves. I got forklift certified to do this. And my sort of like the CEO of a business at the time was out there too. And I remember sort of working with him at night at the site, dumping these bins and cleaning them. And it's just like watching him, mop up the juice of food waste. That was like, you go home and you shower. That's the first thing you do after this. And he was the CEO of this business. And he just didn't even think twice about doing what had to be done to do this pilot, serve this customer, get the business to grow. I think, but I'll always remember that vision of like, there are people who want to be a CEO and, sit on the throne and, make the big sale and go in. And it's like, I think the successful CEOs were the ones who just like really get into the, not nitty gritty, but like the day to day. And they're not above any tasks because they know that everything has to be done and it's not an option. I think that was a really good lesson for me, as a 25-year-old seeing that. You just have to do what you have to do,
Yeah.
no matter what your title is. I think that the second experience that comes to mind is in my previous role in consulting, working hand in hand with one of the partners of the business, who was an amazing guy and just also like really great salesperson's the wrong word, but just like a really good question asker. And he ended up bringing in the majority of revenue into the business, and it was all virtual. Like this was early 2020, as a few years ago. Everybody was conducting business over video call. It's not something that people were really used to doing, 2021, 2022. And we'd go into these calls with like relatively senior people at utilities, which are relatively risk averse companies. And just observing him being so focused all the way through the call. This was another lesson from a friend of mine that the leader of his sales team would say, you get the meeting you prepare for. And he told that to me sort of as I was sort of going through some of these sales calls where fortunately, I got to observe the partner of this business in these sales calls with utilities and how just on task, focused, curious, like always on the point he was on these video calls when it's just naturally harder to do that. I think that was just a really good, lucky experience for me to have observed of like, like it or hate it. A lot of business today is done on video calls. You have to be good, not just with conduct on video calls, but staying on task and knowing, okay, we're walking into this meeting with point A, like where is point B? And how do I use the 29 minutes I have, or 23 if you're talking to Ben Silton and he has tech issues? How do I get to point B at the end of this call so that we can stay on our sort of track towards whatever project we want to build with this customer? Yeah. So I think if I were to draw similarities between those two, sorry, they were probably longer stories than you did for asking, but all of it is just like, what do I have to do to earn this customer's business? Yeah. And then once I have it, how do we deliver it?
Well, I'm glad we did two instead of one because those two are awesome. So
Very
you
different. Yeah.
yeah, no, but they're both uh, seriously important things, at least in my opinion, running companies to keep in mind, and they're easy things to have slip as well. So they're good reminders. So you had mentioned that your involvement with TrelliSense had started, in one of these like pendulum swings from consulting back into the startup space. So can you talk about
Mhm.
what that journey was like, how you got doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, like you, a lot of people talk to folks coming out of undergrads, starting their careers, and they're off looking for advice. And the ones who really want it are proactive, and they reach out to you and say, "Look, I almost always advise like consulting is a really good way to start a career, and it's a great place to be in sort of career transition moments where you just sort of step back, take a high level look, learn about a bunch of different problems, meet a bunch of people, engross yourself in new problems, and it's yeah, so it's there's nothing like it, right? You get to see different problems all the time. I have learned working in multiple consulting roles that it, it was tough for me to stay in though because the more I liked a project, the harder it was to move on from that project. And that move on moment always came because it was consulting, right? Like client goes on to do whatever it is. And so yeah, it's just I learned about myself like when I fall in love with something, I want to keep working on it. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily want to move on. It's one thing for your own role to evolve, but you're still working on the same problems. Another to like just close the door on something and or deliver a report to a customer and then just kind of move on. So yeah, I mean, in a word, it's refreshing. I mean, a startup's a pain in the ass, but it's refreshing to come back to a startup and say, like, here are things that aren't going to get done if I don't do them. Because of that, I have also a lot more ownership over those things, and I
Yeah.
can do them how I want to, and I can work as hard or as not hard as I want, and like I can pour myself into this as much as I want to, and I want to, right?
Yeah.
When I really get into something, like I find myself, like anyone does, like spending more time on it, thinking more
Sure.
about it, trying to do it better every day.
So
So
TrelliSense was
it's
in a position to receive that from you at the end of the engagement.
yeah, so my previous role in consulting was we did a lot of like venture consulting. We would call ourselves venture capital without the capital. So like we often helped launch businesses
Okay.
in
Got it.
exchange for sweat equity. I had already been working with TrelliSense for an hour or two a week,
Okay.
helping them get off the ground, build a website, start customer conversations, raise their first money.
Sure.
So I was familiar with the business, knew I liked the team. It is super smart. It's like the dream combination of like super smart scientists who like know the technology real well and like need a business person to help commercialize it. And that's kind of what I knew I wanted to do next after this consulting role. Um, so it was sort of an easy transition. Yeah, I had already been working with them, right?
Nice.
And so I sort of understood the business. I knew where they needed help. I knew even my first day with TrelliSense was like, okay, I know the stuff I need to go do, right? And it's, um, like any startup, it's we need money, we need customers, right? We need to get our product out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was it, like any new role, it's always like jumping onto a moving skateboard. When you're like, okay, like where does the line between what I do and you do, and
Yeah.
what are the real priorities for the business versus priorities for me? And there was absolutely some of that off the bat, but
Sure. Sure.
there was also I knew that I had already been working with the business, but there was so much of the fire hose left to drink from. So I
Got
did
it.
also in the early days spent a lot of time on the road, conferences, meeting customers, going to customer sites,
Yeah.
asking as many questions as they could, like, what is your real problem? And like, why are you willing to pay us any dollars to help solve that?
Yeah.
Like I had to wrap my head all the way around that. in the early days.
Oh, this is exciting for me because you said exactly what I love to hear, which is you take this incredibly talented, smart group of people that have come up with this awesome idea, and you help bring the idea into the world. And so I wish we had 3 more hours to discuss your experience with that, and maybe we will in the future. But so the okay, so the way that I want to do this is first from your perspective. If you could give a high level timeline between when you became full time with TrelliSense and you could change the timeline. You could start it back when you first engaged with them as a consultant. But I just want an idea of when you got involved and where you're at now, as far as the go to market commercialization side that you've been working on. Between those 2 points, how long has it been? 2.5 years, I think. You can correct me. And inside of that timeline, what are the major milestones that you would say are the different phases that you've worked through? So high level, and then we'll dive into it.
Sure. Yeah. Let me try to draw out just the most interesting points so your readers have a more succinct listen. I mean, we're coming up on 2 years with
Great.
the business, not including the sort of external
Great.
scaffolding that I was doing while in
Okay.
consulting. Um, I had sort of started, I think we called me the chief operating officer. So it was just
Okay.
like, here's all the stuff you do and call yourself what you want. And,
Yep.
there was it wasn't like a formal, the board voted on and stuff. It was
Sure.
just like,
Sure.
we need help. You want to help us?
Do it.
Let's go do it.
Yeah.
Um, and in 80+% of my focus in the early days was customer acquisition. And that's, I should say relationship building, because that's
Okay.
how it always starts, especially like you're selling into infrastructure heavy industries, landfills, oil and gas, like they don't make decisions quickly and they want data. And so a lot of it was just starting conversations, building relationships and saying, what do we need to do before, we're in a room talking about what a project looks like. So it was all that's the only way to get feedback and bring it back to your product development team and say, here's what we need to do. Here are the metrics we need to hit, right? We're starting to realize what point B looks like, like let's go in this direction. Forget that feature. They don't care about it,
Sure.
right? It's bringing that feedback from target customers, not necessarily actually customers, because we didn't have any, revenue when I joined. And, although we were working towards our first project. Over time, we had to raise money. So I sort of shifted more of my time to focus on fundraising, building relationships with investors. What milestones do we need to hit before you consider us, an investment worthy startup? And I think over time, I would say my involvement in product has increased,
Okay.
because there's a natural, there has to be a bridge between the product development, engineering and scientific development function and the customers. And when it's like right now, I am the only one in the company who leads interactions with customers. So
Sure.
I have to be the one bringing that feedback
Sure.
back to that team and helping to prioritize not just feature development, but project development and everything. So find myself playing a little bit more of that internal role.
Yeah.
Um,
Was there a milestone as far as first project, first investment, first iteration of the product that was certain? Was there kind of a milestone in the last 2 years like that?
yeah, I mean, a handful of milestones. Certainly, we launched our first paid commercial project in July of last year. So we're kind of coming up on what is it,
Awesome.
16-ish months of
No, that's
of
great.
revenue, and every project is a learning experience. So
Yeah.
going to 2 and 3 is okay. We figured this out, but now here's an unexpected issue, whatever. So yeah, first revenue
Great.
last July, and then I think sort of the biggest milestone on the fundraising side was this June, so 5 months or so ago. We closed a seed round, and we had closed a pre-seed back in the late summer of
Okay.
2023. But this sort of seed round this summer was sort of the kind of first proper round that had,
Gotcha.
gave us enough capital to get going while we had a commercial product that could actually be put in the
Yeah.
field. So, kind of now we're, um, we have revenue and we have, funds in the bank. And then we brought on a few new team members. So we're actually at a staff of 7 now, myself included, and the snowball's rolling a lot
Yeah.
faster. And also it's been super fun to get, everyone on the team's an all-star. Like you can't be a team of 7 and afford someone who's not,
Yeah,
right?
right,
So
right.
it's all hands on deck all the time. Like the analogy I use is like a tiny little baby can't tolerate 5 pounds of fat,
Yeah.
right? An adult might, you could be a big corporation and
Sure.
you have a few people who aren't really contributing, but if you're a tiny little baby, like fat weighs you down.
Yeah.
So I feel great about the team we have now. And so we're sort of now in execution mode. Today I was like building more customer relationships, launching
Yeah.
new projects, right? And I don't know, turning ourselves into a faster
Yeah.
flywheel.
Well, congratulations. Thank you for laying out those milestones because that's really helpful. And so, my next question, again, just I'm excited for the time when it's right to go really in depth with this. But a lot of the conversations that I have with people are, especially when they're early stage, when they have these ideas, is going from the absolute zero, like you said, you were doing the early scaffolding and talking about a website. Uh, from in your opinion, how would you frame act like you're speaking to somebody who is at the idea stage that it has this idea that they want to pursue and they are at where TrelliSense was when you began to engage with them as a consultant. How would you frame the time spent between coming up with that idea and feeling passionate about it and then the first project that you launched, the first paid project, just going from absolute 0 to 1? Because to me, 1 is that
Yeah.
first paid pilot, the first customer, and going from
Yeah.
absolute 0, like website, how do I allocate my time? Where do I, from a go-to-market standpoint, how should someone think about going from 0 to 1?
Sure. Yeah. It depends. I'm still a consultant at heart, and I'll still say it depends.
Nice.
That's not true. I'm a startup guy at heart, but you can take a guy out of consulting, but not the consulting out of the guy. I think that no one ever really starts from absolute 0. I mean, and anyone who feels like they're at 0 right now listening to this, like look around. You have assets and you need to figure out how to use them, right? Whether they're your friends, your rich uncle, a guy who works at a company that you in the customer target industry you want to sell to, like those are assets, and figure out what they are and go use them. You'll be surprised at how quickly those decimals start to add up and round up. I think that you also need to be realistic about what does 1 really mean, because the way I feel about like going from 0 to 1 in the early days, or just being in a startup in the early days, it's just a long series of false summits. Like you'll talk to a Series C founder, tens of millions of revenue, whatever, but they haven't IPO'd yet. And so that founder feels like they're still on this uphill climb that they haven't really made it, right? And so now, we're post-seed. We are still very much in an uphill climb. It's maybe not as steep as it was going from 0 to 1, but I'm still looking up at the summit of this mountain I'm on, and I'm like, that is really far away. So contextualizing like what 1 really means is important, because you're never going to feel like you got there. That said, maybe let's say 1 is your first commercial project. You got some revenue from a customer. There's a real de-risking of your market. So for the sake of this conversation, let's call that 1. I would recommend to any founder that they have a pretty good idea of where that number 1 is going to come from before they start the business. Like, have that relationship already. Do so much customer discovery before you incorporate your company. Try to talk to as many people who can. Hey, I'm thinking about starting this business. Talk to experts in the field, second-degree connections. Hey, what would you do if you wanted to solve, problem X? Get that idea together and know your top target list of customers, potentially have agreements signed with it. Like we had NDA signed with eventual customers before we incorporated the business. We had LOIs with customers who went away, didn't hear from them for 2 years, and now we're talking to them again. LOS before we incorporated the business. Like there's no reason you can't do that before you're a business. Sure, signing NDAs might be weird who's signing. You might have to sign yourself, but you have to do that kind of stuff to build your pipeline, learn about these customers, and then when you are building your product, you have something to build to. You have to know the problem you're solving before you build your solution, right? I mean, it sounds so trite, but it's honestly often hard advice, even for myself, to follow because you get so obsessed with your product and, oh, hey, look what this can do. This could do this. Like this could solve that problem. This could solve that problem. Look at all these features we could build. And you forget that like just beeline to one, find your customer willing to pay the most of anyone you talk to solve the problem that your product most easily solves and just get there as fast as you can. Because that is what gives you gasoline in your tank to go raise money from investors, build a product development roadmap that you know is going to solve the problem even better, hire people to build that product. It makes everything else easier. So I'm sure that didn't really answer your question, Blake, but hopefully that was a bunch of words of wisdom.
No, there's awesome stuff there. I'm really glad that you went that direction with it. And my follow up is for that initial stage of getting all the way to signing paperwork with somebody with no product and it's just conversation, it's just idea at that point, which I think is really great advice, albeit something extremely difficult. Do you have any advice about how to get in contact with those potential customers if you don't really have an idea of like the direction you're going, and then also how to navigate those conversations when you don't really have a product yet?
It's a really good question, and I wish I had more prescriptive advice. I was actually talking to an advisor just this morning about how to start conversations when, like, why should anyone talk to me? Like everyone has so much noise today with all these AI bots, sending you messages about things that are totally unrelated. How do you sift through that noise? I think you have to start with your own network. You have to get warm intros wherever possible, intros to intros. Every time you talk to somebody, hey, who should I talk to, about this, the thing, or this was really compelling. Like, where do you recommend I go research that more? Who should I get in touch with? There's no substitute for in-person meetings. People know you're not a bot if they shake your hands. You have to go to conferences. Like we met at a conference, right? Like it wasn't really a conference, but it was an in-person event. Go to those events, right? Show up, give people your contact information. Hey, can we follow up and talk about this? Right? And it's like I have to be asking you this question because you did that masterfully. And I think, how do you communicate the value of something when you don't have a product? I think that's the kind of thing you have to kind of build your conception of in parallel with the information you get about the problem that you need to solve, right? So, and understand that your product will, even when you build your product, like it's going to evolve. And 10 years down the road, it might look nothing like it did at year 2. But you have to say, okay, if this is the problem we want to solve, what is everyone else getting it wrong?
Got it.
Right. There's that great book, Feel Like an Artist, like Austin Klingon, right? It's just like, just take what someone else did, do it better, do it differently, figure out what they did wrong, right? Use the benefit of starting from scratch. You're not a Titanic that has to swerve. You're a tiny little speedboat. Like, do something a little different, build your concept, and find 1 or 2 trusted people to give you feedback on that as you build it. And if it's digital, that's even easier because you can A/B test that all you want, right? But if it's hardware, then you have to be a little bit more careful about like, do we really need to build this feature, right? Or does it really enhance the product if we did it this way or that way?
Yeah.
That you need to talk to like real customers to get that kind of feedback.
Got it. Well, it's super helpful. I think. Thank you, I guess, for the shout out there. It's something in addition to that I brought to our initial conversation that I hold close to myself is you have this concept of false summits, because really it's that's there's so many of them when you're still trying to figure out what exactly your product is and what it does, and in my opinion, it's impossible to get to the next false summit if you don't act like the false summit that you're on, even if you know that it's a false summit, is the real one. Like you have to go into the next conversation isn't like, hey, this is the product, this is the solution. Now I have the confidence to ask you all of these questions, even if in the back of my mind I'm like, this is not real or whatever it is. Like there's a certain level of confidence that you need to go into these conversations with potential clients with, in addition to like you're saying, getting the warm introductions once that happens and everything like that. So,
Totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
so it just kind of kills me, but I have two last questions for you. And
Bring it out.
with TrelliSense at the moment, what is your biggest hurdle and how is it also an opportunity?
Excellent phrasing of the question. Probably the biggest hurdle is, and this might be some recency bias talking, but in a lot of the applications we're pursuing, they essentially require that and we haven't even explained what TrelliSense does. So we measure methane emissions using optical sensors. So it's continuous measurement. It's long distance. We use invisible lasers to do this. And we have a sort of passive sensor as well that uses the sunlight to measure methane emissions. And we do this for leak detection and mitigation. We do this also for measuring mitigation, reduction of methane emissions. Different customers have different uses for this, but the sort of practice of methane emissions measurement is roughly similar across sites. What we're learning in the case of, one example here is agriculture. If we want to use our sensors to measure methane reductions on farms, you have to do peer-reviewed studies, right? So that's kind of the only way to really get industry validation, be written into carbon credit methodologies. That's not something you can do in a week. It's not something you can build into your product. It is something you still just have to do. And so what we have to go do now, and this is not, get paid, it's not super lucrative, right? It's you just have to do it, and it takes months, if not years, to do this. We have to go get that validation. Now, not every single project's going to require it, but
Sure.
broad industry adoption will. We have to go do that, and the same is true of leak detection in oil and gas. Like there's controlled release studies that you have to participate in because people will ask, show us your controlled release data, and unless you have recent data and high fidelity data, and then it's either the conversation ends or it's unlubricated, shall we say. Why is that an opportunity? Well, it's if we do that in partnership with potential customers, that's a good way to build a relationship, right? And sort of get their feedback along the way, help them build the design criteria for the studies, help them sort of tell the story of the measurement as well. Where do we want to measure? What are we going to use this for? How do we tighten the confidence bands as much as possible with the data we get? So yeah, the opportunity is saying who wants to partner with us on these initial studies and sort of be with us on the ground floor and grow with us from there. I think that's always an opportunity. Anyone will find customers who are excited to be a first customer, and those are worth their weight in gold.
Nice. With all this work left to be done and the significance of what you're building, what inspires you?
Oof. What inspires me? A million things, I would say. I'm inspired by the absolutely tireless work of the rest of my team. Like you look around you and everyone's working hard and like really cares about what they're doing. Like that's just inherently inspiring. I'm inspired by my 1-year-old who's making pterodactyl noises from the room next to me. Who, sorry if there's background noise because of that, but
No.
yeah, I want to give him a, case study, role model, someone to say, here's what my dad did in his career.
Yeah.
It's inspiring to think about it in those terms as well when you work in sustainability. If, I want him to be proud of what his dad did or does. So there's also two very different examples, but both
No,
things that give me inspiration every day for sure.
well, that's wonderful, Ben. This is thank you for the work that you're doing. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. If there's anyone else that was inspired to follow along with your story, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. You can check us out at TrelliSense.com. You can email me, ben@TrelliSense.com. Usually responsive, unless it looks like a bot email. Um, and yeah, we've got a LinkedIn page. Shoot us a follow there and see latest news and updates from the page, because trying to get better at keeping the public informed on our progress. So yeah, more followers give us more reason to do that. But
Great.
Blake, thank you for hosting me today and for the conversation.
You got it, Ben. Well, I'm excited to stay in touch, see where you guys go. Definitely speak more about this. I feel like we only touched the surface on all of this commercialization talk. So thank you so much, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you, Blake.